welcome to our lecture this evening on in our Changing Asia series. The Changing Asia series that IHC does in collaboration with SPS, which is the Society for Policy Studies. We have Uday Bhaskar here, who's actually the creator of this series, and he was supposed to be out of town, but he's here, which is our good fortune. And we have the privilege of having Dr. Rukmini here today to speak to us, and I will come to her and tell you a little more about her in a minute. Just for those of you for whom this may be the first of our Changing Asia series lectures, it is basically IHC's aim to be able to be a platform for civil society discourse, in the sort of pursuit of which we've had a series of lectures over the last year, and where we have actually addressed subjects which are wide and varied, ranging from security to foreign policy, economics, growth, redistribution, and even the challenges and the journey of the Indian woman. So they have been wide and varied. And our speakers in the past have been Mr. Shyam Saran, former Foreign Secretary, Dr. Shankaracharya, Dipankar Gupta, Shiv Shankar Menon, Raja Mohan, Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee, and today we have Dr. Banerji with us. Rukmini Banerji is CEO of Pratham Education Foundation. Since 1996, she has been a member of the leadership team of the organization. She has extensive field experience in the program implementation, as well as in assessment, survey, evaluation, and research in both rural and urban sectors across the country. Until recently, she was responsible for Pratham's programs and activities in several large states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. As director of ASER Center, the Research and Assessment Unit of Pratham, she led the annual Status of Education report effort, widely regarded as the most reliable annual survey on children's schooling status and basic learning levels for each state and rural district in India since its launch in 2005. She took over as CEO of Pratham in July 2015. Initially trained as an economist in India, she did her BA at St. Stephen's College and attended the Delhi School of Economics. A Rhodes Scholar at the Oxford University, she completed her PhD at the University of Chicago, where she also did postdoctoral research at the Population Research Center. Originally from Bihar, she is now based in New Delhi. Rukmini writes frequently on education and enjoys writing books for children and stories. Some of her much-loved books include Romnia, Mimi and the Buffalo, My Barwari Ma, Hurry Up, My Friends, and many others. So today's Rukmini is Dr. Banerji Rukmini, because we just established a LSR Connect. So she's going to be speaking to us on challenges in Indian education, lessons from Asia. We all know that the challenges that the Indian education system face are wide and varied, and I don't know how one session is going to be able to address so much of it. But what is the learning from our neighbors? What is it that we have actually achieved? Where have we left certain sectors lacking? We are hoping that some of these concerns will be touched upon, and more than what Dr. Banerji talks to us about, it is always nice in this lecture series to be able to engage with questions or thoughts that you might have. So may I now invite Dr. Banerji to take the... Oh yes, please. Can I request you all to please switch your phones off?
Thank you so much, Vidyun. When I got an email requesting me to speak, I think Sachin, many of you know Sachin, I think it was done very nicely because I felt like I had to speak about education. So having spent many years in education, I felt that would be, potentially easy to do. Then I got an email which showed me who the previous speakers were. If that email had come before, I don't know if I would have agreed, because it's a very intimidating list of very renowned experts on many matters including Asia. And then I looked more carefully at the topic that I had agreed to speak on. So challenges of Indian education, to some extent can handle that. But what came after the semicolon, I think is going to be quite a stretch for me. But I'm grateful to the Habitat Center for pushing a little bit, because otherwise we tend to just speak about the bubble that we are in and quite happy within the bubble. So perhaps we should have put a question mark at the end of that thing, saying lessons from Asia, what have we learned? So I hope you'll bear with me, and I'm looking forward to a much richer discussion perhaps amongst us, rather than question answers just directed to me. Some months ago, about I think 6 months ago, we had a bunch of visitors. This was a group of I think about 20 people who came from many countries of Asia. And they came to visit us. You can see two of them here, one from Mongolia, one from Bhutan. And this whole group was sent to us through UNESCO in Bangkok. And I'm very curious, because we have been doing this thing called the Annual Status of Education Report, the ASAD report, for a number of years. And we've had a lot of interest. I mean, we did it because we thought that's what made some sense in our own context. And over the years, over the last 10 years, we've had a lot of interest from African countries. And so we were used to interest from that side across that ocean. And so when about 18 or 20 people from the rest of Asia, I should also say that we've had very close comings and goings with Pakistan. Sometimes the comings and goings are easy, sometimes they're not so easy, but I think despite that, the ASAD survey that we do in India, Pakistan does a very similar thing by a local group there. We've had similar connections with Bangladesh. But beyond that, we had never thought, and we hadn't looked, and we really didn't have as an organization any connections. So when all these people came, I mean, we were very happy to have them, and it took us a couple of days before we could say, and is there really anything that we can do that you haven't done already? But I think that having them with us also raised a lot of questions for us and gave us an opportunity. We just hadn't had any opportunity, like many other Indians, to really interact with people who have been working in education from those countries. And so when I got the email from Habitat Center, I thought this was a good time to at least put some, perhaps unformed thoughts in front of you to have a discussion. But before we ventured out, I thought I should just put down a couple of, where are we here in India right now? The first part of the title, challenges. What do we see as challenges? I thought, there are many challenges, and many things that one got to talk about, but I'm going to talk about just 4 or 5 things. Well-known things. Many people in the audience, I'm sure, know far more than this. So, last 10 years or more, we've had almost every child in school. 95% plus enrollment rates for now a good decade, and even before that, it was pretty much above 90 for quite a long time. Those who are still out of school, I think, have some very critical problems, but it's like the last mile problem in any sector. But this now, we are a almost universal primary education, and from the point of view of enrollment country. Second thing, which is a natural consequence of the first, is that we have more and more children staying longer and longer in school. So, compulsory education is 14, and I believe, and I'm not a historian, that usually these compulsory education laws come into place when almost everybody's in school anyway. So which is probably the case for us as well. Just to give you an idea about how much things have changed, just in 10 years, if you look at the government data, we see that enrollment in class 8 across the country 10 years ago was about 12 million. We have roughly about 25-26 million children in every age group in India. So 10 years ago, up to 8th, presumably only half were lasting till 8th. The number that I have here, 24 million, is from I think 2013-14, which indicates, like the law, that almost everybody in that age group has actually reached up to the class 8. Now this is a big shift, very large shift, and I have to look at numbers from other countries to see if such a big shift has happened in such a short period of time. So these are clearly big gains that we've been managed to do. My own home state is Bihar, and if you look at the Bihar board exam, Every year, 10 years ago, there were about 6 lakh children who sat for that exam, and that number is now 14 or 15 lakhs. So really, beyond even the compulsory stage, there are a lot more people who are reaching that stage. And this is quite an accomplishment. But if we look a little bit closer at things that we in Pratham and Asar have been doing for a while, again, these are now quite well known, they're in the headlines and so on all the time, that our basic reading and math, basic learning levels are quite low. This, in case there is someone who doesn't know what Asar looks like, this is what Asar is. There's a very simple reading test that has these, in all languages, I've just put the Hindi one up. And really the highest level at which we ask children is this kind of a very simple story. It's roughly at a second standard level. That is what the highest level in Asar is. And this is what all children are given from age 5 to 16. I won't go into the details of Asar, but that if you can look at the 2014 results, about half the children in class 5 were able to read in their own language this kind of passage. Another fact that we see not just from the data that we have in Asar, but now almost every data set that India has, including the government, shows that over time levels are declining. Now, why is that happening? There are all kinds of theories, but the fact is that some cohorts of children who are in school today for the same class are probably gaining less, different types of schools, than maybe 10 or 8 years ago. The final fact, I think, is also again leads from the fact number 3 and 4, that if you don't pick up these very foundational skills early in your school life, the chances that you'll be able to gain from being in school and gaining the kind of things that you are expected to learn in different classes naturally reduces. So which means that over your lifetime in school, you continue to be in school for a long time, but the value added for each additional year is quite flat. So this is what, just if you had to summarize a picture, this is what it would be. Now we, know from, our own school days, from children who are in school, that if I had to describe how teaching happens in most Indian schools, whether at an elite school or at a, normal school, typically a class 5 teacher teaches from the class 5 textbook. And you may spend a little bit of time revising what you've done before, but that is how we, to a class 5 or class 4 or whatever class you're in, the way that we organize our teaching and learning is to start with whatever has been prescribed for that class. So we teach at grade level. And we expect that by the end of the year, by finishing the chapters, and this is very common to hear in any school system, कि syllabus complete हो गया, worry कि syllabus complete नहीं होगा, I should have reached chapter 30, but अभी तक 18 तक पहुंचे हैं, and so on and so forth. So clearly our whole system is organized on the assumption that you'll move systematically from class to class, and in each class you will be presented with whatever that class expects of you. Now, one question I think that we need to tackle in India is, so when I teach, if I'm a 5th standard teacher and you're my 5th standard class, and I'm teaching you 5th standard stuff, how many are you actually able to benefit from that? Is that one of the things that goes behind some of these worrying numbers that we see? And again, from Asar data we've tried to pull out. So this is actually class 3. And this, I put one example of the kind of task in arithmetic that you're expected to do in India in class 2, which is to do, subtraction problems of this type. And I'm looking at whether in class 3, so I've gone to class 3 and I'm being taught at class 3 level. So how many children in my class 3 class are actually at the level at which I'm teaching? And here the Asar is a household survey. So, but these are children who go to different kinds of schools. And you can see two facts here. One is that even in the private schools, half the class is below, in class 3 is below grade level. And if I look at the government schools, and I think again this distinction between private and government is really different kinds of families. I don't think they're different kinds of schools. I mean, they are different kinds of schools, but they're different mainly because they come from different families. If you look at the orange bar, you'll see that all India, this is putting all the states together, 20% of kids are at grade level, but what is being taught in the class is actually much higher than that. You also see the declining levels. This is an All India picture, and as we all know, there is very big variations across the country, and so I've just pulled out for the same indicator 2009 and 2014 for a bunch of different states, and you see very sharp declines in some places, low levels. There's a variation in the low levels, but pretty sharp decline everywhere in a short period of really 5 or 6 years. So, without belaboring this point, clearly we have a lot of challenges. And we can also see that over the last 5 years, despite I think increases in expenditure, things haven't gotten better. Now, one way to worry about this problem is to think about what should we do about it. A natural one, and where shall we look to for solutions? And so therefore the question arises, where shall we learn from? We'll come to whether we are learning or not, but where are possibilities of where we can learn from? And this is where I felt that it may be interesting as part of your symposium to say what is happening in Asia, who knows what about Asia? Within the education, we are practitioners and therefore don't have access. We were just having a very interesting discussion before the talk about universities and role of universities. As practitioners, we really don't have many links to Indian universities. So as people who are interested and invested in trying to do something about education, what can we learn from people around us in the region of what is going on? Now, I'm sure many of you are very well versed in economic and other developments that have happened in the Asian region. And I think that as the economic development patterns across the region over the last 25 years have been changing, there's been a lot of interest in how has Philippines or a Taiwan or Japan, of course, is the key example. China now, every comparison has to be made to China. How, what has been going on with them? And I think that, I was, again, in preparing for this talk, I was actually appalled by how little I knew about many things I should know about. So, one of the things I think is that as this East Asia miracle economically or the shifts in their economy were happening, starting from sort of the mid-80s onwards, in the US and in the West, a lot of increasing research interest in understanding how these patterns all intersected. And I think in a short period of time, and it's just my layman's understanding of this is that many trends were happening at the same time. The manufacturing sector was increasing. A lot of it was based on kinds of industries which high school educated people could participate in. Big demographic shifts over each subsequent generation. A lot of changes in family size. Fertility, women's fertility falling, very big increases in women's labor force participation. So economic, demographic trends of big sizes were going on at the same time. And how did we know about all of this? Is I think starting in the mid-80s and certainly accelerating in the 90s, there were large data sets that were being generated. I've named two that at some long ago time when I was still at university, during my PhD I worked on. But this Indonesian family life survey, for example, belongs to a family of surveys where they have gone back to the same families multiple number of times starting from mid-80s till almost very recently. And this large data sets, the way they came and they were put together and the way they have been used has been a very interesting collaboration of universities both in those countries as well as in Western countries, and funding for these kinds of things also pieced together over different kinds of sources. In the health sector you have quite a lot of these health surveys that have been going on also from the same time. Now whether it is health or it is economic and household socio-economic surveys, there is always a little bit of education there. And therefore you can tease out, which many economists have done, what have been the corresponding education patterns accompanying these kinds of big shifts. And then as we move closer to the current times, I think the rise of Korea, very big happenings in China, etc., are all part of this kind of interconnected study. But in education per se, I don't think we've seen as much going into depth in the way that I think the demographers or the health people have. But there were a couple of interesting studies, and I think some of these came out of, again, there are many foreign policy experts here, and I don't know, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think some of the deeper studies came out of America's insecurity that Asia is overtaking them in all kinds of ways, particularly in their human capital development. And one such piece of work, or this is actually a several connected studies, which I have found very interesting over the years, was done by two researchers as part of a big mathematics survey that happened in the mid-90s. And here what they did was not just look at these international tests, but actually try to go into classrooms across different contexts to see what it is that was happening in Asian classrooms versus European classrooms versus American classrooms. There have been two sets of studies done by the similar group, one on students, and both have obviously, in the classroom we have only two kinds of animals, teachers and students. But one is called the learning gap and one is called the teaching gap. And these are quite old actually now, they're all from the 90s. But I think they still hold a lot of relevance in how researchers have tried to understand kind of the nuts and bolts and what is actually going on, the dynamics behind these big trends. And just to share with you, here are some very pertinent kinds of things and big contrasts. What they did, these were videotapes of 8th grade classrooms in mathematics across these three countries, Japan, Germany and America. And I think that, the research did a lot of different things, but the couple of key factors that they were looking at is what were teachers trying to achieve. We all know, if you've taught anybody, including your own kids, that often you try to achieve something and you don't actually quite succeed. But the goal is important because it drives you towards what it is that you're trying to do. So what was the teacher trying to achieve? What was the goal? Therefore, how did they structure what they were going to do? And then what were teachers and students doing based on very large number of videotapes? I think they looked at something like 300 classrooms over a whole year in teaching math. And here are some of the things that they found. You can see that they've divided it. Just to make sort of clear points, they've divided it up. That did you think what you were doing was to teach a skill, or were you trying to teach conceptual understanding of concepts? And it turns out that they did interviews as well. In addition to the videotapes, they did interviews. They collected quite a lot of data using different means. They found that clearly in Japan, the goal of what they were doing was very different from the goal of what was, let's say, going on in Germany or in America, where the stated goal of the teachers was that in Japan was that I'm trying to teach conceptual understanding. I'm trying to help children link ideas to facts, to procedures, to concepts. Whereas what US teachers mostly said was, I'm trying to teach them how to solve a problem. I'm trying to teach them skills that they can apply elsewhere. Another couple of interesting things from those studies was what, during the class, what kinds of activities were students and teachers doing. And again here, they make a very interesting distinction between how a German or a US classroom, very broadly construed, works, that the teacher comes in, and it sounded to me quite a bit like how our classrooms work. Teacher comes in those countries, that here is what we're going to learn today, shows how to work out a problem, and then lets the class practice on their own, and then walks around the class and helps kids who are individually struggling. In the Japanese case, it seemed like the standard lesson script was quite different, where a problem was proposed, and then kids were left in groups to come up with their solutions of what they thought could be. And when you read the work that they've done, it's very interesting about how different countries, different teachers deal with children struggling. So in America, apparently there's a rush to get to the right answer, which sounded very familiar. That's exactly how we were taught, and that's exactly how I see our own schools working. There's a big black and white between right and wrong, and as when you get your answer right, then that's it. You don't need to worry about how you got there. And if you got it wrong, then you somehow feel it's your fault, and then, it's very black and white, the right and wrong. In the Japanese case, from many, many hundreds of hours of videotapes, what they see is that kids are pushed to find out what are alternative ways of solving a problem. And then, as you can see from their tabulation, there is far more student presentation of the strategies that they used and discussion in a group of the pros and cons of those strategies. Also in the kinds of activities that they do in the classroom, both in US and in Germany, there is a lot of practicing what the teacher has just done. Whereas in Japan, you can see there's a much wider types of actual activities that kids are doing in the classroom. Now, the reason to bring up this study, apart from the fact that I really like it, is that these methods of not just looking at how have different countries done on broad, scales, but actually trying to get into what is the culture of teaching, how are teachers oriented, and what do they exactly do, I think is a very interesting way of trying to figure out. And in their writing, they talk a lot about what they learned most from this study was less about Japan and Germany, but much more about themselves. And I think that is one of the real key reasons to do comparative work, is that when you look at somebody else, I think you get a better understanding of who you are. Now this is all research. What about, what do other people think? What do people in the popular media, how are these cross-country comparisons being looked at? For example, here on TV, are we seeing anything which talks about, we now see increasing movies about what is happening in schools, or I don't know how many people have seen Nil Batte Sanata. It's an interesting film about what goes on. I mean, it's both about families as well as about schools, and I think we are seeing increases of that. But at least I haven't seen too many films on TV which bring other countries and what they are doing in schools. I think maybe that will happen, it hasn't happened yet. But about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, there was a film, again I highly recommend you should see it, called 2 Million Minutes. I don't know if anybody in this room has seen this. There is 2 million minutes from when a kid goes to 9th till the end of high school. And this documentary film follows 3 pairs of students. 2 in America, and you can see they're all boy-girl, 2 in Bangalore, and 2 in Shanghai. And again, through this whole film, it's not just about what happens in the classroom, like the Stigler and Hebert research studies, but this one is really about hopes, aspirations, the children's own, what they do in school, what they do outside school, what does the mother say, what does the father say. Lots of countries, mothers and fathers say different things about the same child, different hopes and aspirations, the school principals, leading people from industry in that country and how they are perceiving through the lives of these 6 kids. And again, I think as you listen to the commentary, you can see that it's an attempt to really shake up people in America, where it has been made, about the fact that these Asian countries are working harder, getting ahead in science and math. I was asked to review this film. I had never been asked to review a film for an academic journal. And so I immediately said yes, because I didn't know exactly how one watches a movie and then writes a review. But when I saw it, I actually really felt very strongly that the Chinese and the Indian kids were losing out a great deal from constantly being in this high pressure situation. But the intent of the film was something different. So it was quite interesting that even from this film, you got a sense of what, this one at least had India in it, you got a sense of what is the educational landscape from which this, these kids have to move on and go ahead. One, before I kind of wind up, as far as India is concerned, there is one unique effort that is being made over the last 15 years. It's called Young Lives. And I think that even in the Indian discussions on education, it's not really, does not play as big a role as I think it needs to play. These are 12,000 children across these 4 countries, Vietnam and India being 2. And in India, they focused on Andhra Pradesh, and now, of course, their sites are in both states, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. And they've been following these children from a very young age for the last 15 years. Same kids, 15 years, and looking at a whole variety of things. There's a big school component, school education component, but also health, also risk, also vulnerability. And what they're trying to understand is what kinds of situations that kids are in today are going to predict what happens later, or as you see kids today, how can you connect them to what has happened. The Vietnam-India comparison to me is the most interesting. for a whole variety of reasons. Because you see that in 10 or 15 years ago, in some ways Vietnam was in a far worse spot than we were, and how through the lives of these, of what is happening to different age cohorts. Again, I think this is very rare because we have very little that actually can do these direct comparisons across countries to help you see, what are we doing right or wrong and how can we learn from others. It so happens, again I didn't know this, that this week the PISA results have been declared. It's like like we have for board exams in India. I think this is an international board result, more or less. And because we don't participate, we participated once, we haven't done it this year. But if you just Google on PISA, the whole thing is full of headlines, newspaper reports from many of the countries. Especially, I think there are two extremes. The countries that have done very well are naturally congratulating themselves, and the countries who've done very badly. Australia apparently has seen a declining trend over time, so there's lots of hand-wringing going on in Australia, lots of noise and fury and whatever, congratulations happening. And you may remember some years ago when Finland was on the top, and everybody was talking about Finland. I live in Hauskas, and Finland is roughly the size of Hauskas, perhaps. But, and we never, even living in Hauskas, talk about what's happening in the schools in Hauskas, but we were all very concerned about Finland. I've had senior government bureaucrats at different states saying, "Aapko Finland ke baare mein kuch pata hai kya?" So, presumably from tomorrow we'll talk about Singapore in the same way. Lots of, achanak, they have the magic bullet with which we can now, solve all our problems. This time's PISA is on science, and I think PISA is also getting more and more sophisticated. You can actually take the PISA test, which I did this morning. And then I felt maybe I should have had tea before taking the test because I didn't do very well. I have 27 years of education, and I didn't do very well in the PISA test. But when I took it in the afternoon, I did slightly better. So it's focused on, kind of trying to figure out what kind of a scientific temperament you have and so on. Now, when India participated in PISA, so one of the things I guess the case I'm trying to make is being part of cross-national studies gives you an opportunity to look at similar factors elsewhere. We haven't been part of too many socio-economic demographic cross-country studies other than in health. We certainly have not been part of any in-depth classroom studies. We were luckily for us part of a film, which is only right. But I think that even this, the opportunity to be part of some kind of an international effort like this gives you a good opportunity to figure out many things. We came very low last time, not very low, we were second from the bottom. And so everybody was very taken up with, because we like to come first in class. I remember my father used to say, "Kiske bache second aate, sabhi ke bache to first aate." So, we don't like coming second last for sure. And so, I think we lost an opportunity in really being worried about being second last, about what is this PISA and what does it do and, why are we doing badly or whatever. And so I think that this opportunity, that being part of something bigger, this is just an example of what kind of questions are asked in PISA, because very often I find that people are very worried about PISA but don't know what's in it. And if you looked hard at what's in it, you can think of ways and means in which, such things could perhaps be part of what you do in class. So this is just this is one of their questions that they released about running in hot weather and the role of humidity and I think temperature and various things. And whether this would predict dehydration or not. And again, this was a test, and so I suppose it's high stakes. But I think that we are not presented. And when I took this test at 6 in the morning, I thought it was a tough sawal hai. I had to really read it carefully. And I'm substantially more than 15. But I think that these are the kinds of things that you're asking kids to think, which is, you should know at what stage you're going to get dehydrated and hopefully not get to that stage. So I think we're missing an opportunity, but by not looking deeper into what is the architecture of all these things. What are we asking kids to do? Presumably in these countries, these are the kinds of math tasks that people do. The other thing from PISA also, I don't know what happens in other countries, you become very self-reflective. Why have I not done well? And don't look enough at who is doing well and, is that as expected or not? So within the whatever literature comes out, some countries are, again, I'm a little bit obsessed with Vietnam these days, without knowing too much about it. But the PISA, Vietnam has done very well in PISA for the last, and the interesting thing is not that they rank well, it is that their bottom 25% or bottom 10% does very well. So if you go back to one of the challenges that I think we face in India about our teaching and learning being completely aimed at the top of the class and thereby missing everybody who is below, which is a very large percentage. For example, in Delhi, one of the assessments that the Delhi government has done shows that in 6th standard, something like 74% kids could not read the 6th standard textbook. But if I'm being taught from it, then clearly the teacher is teaching just that top 25% and not everybody else who's below it. Vietnam seems to have used exactly the opposite strategy. Their bottom is at the level of the average of OECD countries, although their economic condition is much more like its neighbors. And therefore, I mean, I made some phone calls to, educationists to say, like the last few days, to say, "Aapko Vietnam ke baare mein kuch pata hai kya?" They said, "Oh, PISA ka naam abhi aana." This is just an example that this result that we see at the end is an outcome of policies, of practices of many years, where clearly investments have been done at building the bottom well, early years well, that are now leading to all kinds of possibilities for kids as they get older. Just incidentally, we've been doing this very simple asar for many years, and we also, maybe partly because of all this PISA stuff, have been thinking about if in India, forget about OECD standards and international standards, we are big enough, we can have our own standards, what would we want a 15-year-old in India to be able to do? And I have some colleagues here who have some very interesting responses. So we've been trying to figure out, and ASAR is a household survey, so you go one-on-one in the household and you work with kids. And so in that format, what would be the kinds of skills to explore? I don't know if I should share this, but one of the pilots that was done by the team just earlier this month was in Ahmednagar. And I guess they had time from being in the field all day, they went to visit Anna Hazare. And since they are accustomed to asking anybody they meet, whether it is a sarpanch, a bus driver, कि 15 साल के बच्चे को क्या आना चाहिए, they asked Anna Hazare also, कि भाई आपको क्या 15 साल के बच्चे को आना चाहिए. And the answer they got is not very different from what people are saying. He said sanskar. Now sanskar, we have to break it up into building. I mean, sanskar is very important, I agree. But वो क्या है exactly वो संस्कार? और वो उसको हम घर में या स्कूल में कैसे करें? Might be a little bit tough to do. So since we are very simple people, we've been trying to think of what kind of decisions should a child be able to make, what kinds of things should he be able to do. And I just couldn't resist this, just a little, this is, PISA is a lot more complicated than this, but PISA also has many levels. And this is really, with all the talk of financial literacy, I mean, this is from a slightly earlier period where you actually had cash in hand and you could make these decisions. About you have to decide that you have so much money and these are your two options for books and which is the better option, which one would you take? So some attempt to make a financial decision based on the money that you have, and we find that in a pen and paper test, because reading levels are not very strong, children don't do very well, but when this is explained a little bit, then decisions can be taken. So whatever OECD may do may be one way to do it, but I certainly think if you want to get to the idea whether a child that you know, or a child that you meet is able to take this decision, the method that we were using by presenting some examples in front of him seemed like children could engage. They may not have the tools to engage if your reading skills are not strong enough, but thinking skills certainly were in place. There is no clock here, so, and she's not stopping me, but I will stop. So, I guess one of the big things that this title made me think is, in the education, given all these challenges that we have, are we even curious about what other people are doing? And I was talking to a friend of mine on this. I've been trying to pick everybody's brains, and that's been also an interesting exercise. I don't know if your other speakers do this, they probably don't need to, but it's a good excuse. And if you say, Habitat Center, I have to talk, can you talk to me, then people take you very seriously and say, yeah, tell me, what are you going to say, okay? Somebody said to me that, why are you looking beyond? do we in education have curiosity to learn from each other, even from within the states? Have we looked to find out, I know we looked at Himachal being very high and Bihar being very high before and very low now. Has anybody tried within these states to ask each other, what is it that we are doing? So perhaps this comparative lens doesn't exist and therefore we are not able to extend this even at home, forget about beyond our borders. The next question is, do we want to learn from Asia? Now, and if we did, how would we do it? Are our universities linked? Do we have, I know that in the sphere of, let's say, military know-how, perhaps there are greater links. Trade, there may be greater links. But I think in the education sector, especially in the school sector, I'm not sure there are available mechanisms and platforms on which you can come and go. And therefore, what does it take to build these so that there is a more easy transference of experiences across? Just because something is happening in Vietnam doesn't mean I can get there, short of seeing. So how does one, if you wanted to learn from Asia, do it? I don't have, an answer for that. But I would say, coming back to the group that came to visit us, we found that to be an incredibly good experience because there were people, I think, from 12 or 13 countries. And each of them, as they went into villages with us, were bringing up examples of their own countries. And I want to just finish with two because I think it also gave us a mirror of who we are, even though we had not left home. One of the villages that I was in, we were a motley bunch of 4 people. There was me, there was a lady from Uganda, there was a man from Mongolia, and a gentleman from Bhutan. And the whole village wanted to understand, and there were lots of people who asked some questions about, aapke desh mein kya hota hai? Mothers wanted to know, what do mothers in Bhutan do? They have, to help their children and so on and so forth. And I think it was just a very natural exchange that happened. This is a sarpanch who, after having all these visitors, he wanted to have a discussion and we were invited to go and sit with him. And then he said he actually could speak some English, but he said that in English I'll not be able to explain what I really want to know. And the question he asked his team was, please ask them कि उनके देश में democracy हम लोग के जैसा ऊपर का है कि नीचे का है? Though I'm not trained as a diplomat, I felt like this is, really however asked this question should work. And then the Mongolia guy gave them very lots of examples, saying that, like for some things we are also upar ka, but for some things we may be deeper. And I did not think that you could actually have, and I think that the discussion of democracy in education and what is possible and who benefits, these are certainly relevant things to talk about. The cast of characters, we had a good discussion, but it was sort of out of course, if you will. The final, I think, impression from our having these people together came from the group that had come from Afghanistan. And, otherwise they were very much like us in the way that they were asking questions, dealing with children, and so on and so forth. But when we came back, this was in Aurangabad in Maharashtra, we were in neighboring villages, not far from Ellora, for example. When they came back and when the teams were talking about what they had learned and what they had seen, the Afghans just shook their head, and the senior member in their team said, "You have no idea how lucky you are, you can just go into a village. We can't do that in our country anymore." So I just want to end here saying that I'm not sure that we've, learned anything new. This was just a series of ramblings. But I'm very grateful for bringing up this topic because I think this has raised, for someone like me who's been working in this field for so long, your invitation to come and speak here has appalled me about how little I know outside our own country. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Banerji. Your ramblings were most engaging, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed this because it was, in that sense, not, you've already engaged them. I can already feel that there is going to be a lot of discussion, which will be hopefully what we can spend another 15 minutes since you stayed well within your time. So, but it was really such an informative and engaging and unexpected, if I may say so, lecture, because it took us on a journey which is off the course, and which is how we feel that the education should be. It should be engaging, should be inclusive, and it should make you discover something which is not prescribed. So I'm going to open the floor up to those who have questions. We have mics that will go around, so please raise your hand. Just identify yourself, your name, and then ask your question, and keep it to a question, please. Thank you.
Ma'am, good evening. I am Sanjay Rawal, and I must appreciate commendable lecture, and as she's already said. So coming on to the question, your topic is wonderful, and at a policy level, I speak more like a parent, and like as you mentioned in your lecture also, yeah, all parents expect their child to be the best, but everybody can't be 99%. So like I am a parent with my child going class 9, and with all the problems which we know and what is existing, what is your advice to parents?
Yes, absolutely. This is entirely you're going to be responsible for a new generation.
It doesn't have to be question answer. As I said, it could easily be a discussion. My advice to the parent is, I think that there will be pressures that come from outside. From the 9th, the pressure is only going to rise. According to me, the toughest time in your life is when you're in 10th. Things get a lot better after that. So, as parents, I think we need to think about our children in a way that doesn't pressurize them. Because every child has unique things, and very often as you go through the school system, at least our current school system, all those things that they may want to do get suppressed, and only these academic, scholastic, indicators become important. I want to just give you an example from something that we are doing. This is in rural, we are doing it in several places, but the example is from rural UP. This is an area in which we have worked before, and the basic reading level is, at least they can read simple things fluently. And we've given them tablets with stuff on it, which is not necessarily from the curriculum at all. So there are all kinds of games, for example, NASA has lots of videos. I'm not sure, I don't know if that's a stipulated part of space program that you create videos that children can use. But the NASA has videos like how do you eat a sandwich in space. If you had to take a kapda and drink water out of it, what happens in space? I think these are all, And so these have been just put on the tablets and they are given. And we are amazed as to what these rural children are actually able to do when they look at these. It's almost like they behave in a particular way in the prescribed boundaries of the education system and school and all that. And once you're outside, you're actually a completely different, person. So my advice would be encourage that other space, because in that constrained space, they will maximize to the extent they are going to. But if we bring that pressure onto the other space, then the child has nowhere else to go. So I hope your kid is in the audience also.
Yeah. I have two questions, one a big picture question and one a classroom level question. The big picture question, of course, goes to the hospital staff as well. We've been sort of thinking about India as a hub of Asia whatever, the India-centric view is what we've been talking about. Now, India's soft power possibly could come from the education space, but our rankings in the world, higher education and visa rankings have led. Think about ASER, for example, as a toolkit for India's soft power, and I'd love to hear your views on whether we can take that forward and create a position of at least centrality in the Asian context. That's the first question. The second one was about the language of teaching and learning. Whenever I've gone into rural schools and asked principals, so what is actually happening in your classrooms? How do you supervise what's happening in your classrooms? Is there teaching and learning? What I've discovered, even before the comparison question comes in, is that they do not know how to describe the process. They do not have the language to describe the process of what is actually happening in the classroom. Teachers हैं, पढ़ा रहे हैं, बोल रहे हैं, textbook चल रही है, लिख रहे हैं. But that actual engagement, the language doesn't exist. Is there something we can do about that, or just your views on that?
So the soft power question I'll leave to others. I think you're right. I think that we don't have, when you don't have a vocabulary, I think it means that you don't talk about it enough. For example, I'm told that in Alaska or wherever, cold countries, there's lots of words for snow. I'm a bad Bengali because I'm from Bihar, but for example, among Bengalis, there's many words for stomach upset, because you talk about it a lot. No offense to any Bengali in the audience. So I think that one of the things about it, there is not a language to talk, it means you don't talk about it enough. And therefore, this is clearly an invitation to see how, if you had to talk about it, you would begin. So, if you don't talk about it enough, it also means that nobody wants to listen to it. On both sides. I had a very interesting example given to me about, from somebody who works in disability, that in most Indian languages, the vocabulary or the word to describe disability is very negative. And you can think of examples. And that very, by the very definition of that word, you start off at a very negative, point. So, however, I think that we do a lot of work with government school teachers, and I find that when you start the process of engagement, in the first day, second day, third day, there is some stiffness. But when you're along for the ride, it's not just about what's happening in the classroom, how people talk about children. We do a lot of work with mothers. And I've been in many discussions in which we say कि अच्छा आप बच्चे के साथ बातचीत करते हैं, and people say हाँ करते हैं, सभी लोग करते हैं, and then we say अच्छा this morning, from the morning, what all have you said? And I remember asking this question and thinking to myself, what have I said to my kids? And what had I said? Get up, have your breakfast, you're going to be late for school. This is not quite baatcheet. It's instructions. And so I think that I think how we talk about children, how teachers talk about children, how parents talk about children, how easily we say, ये तो नालायक है, अरे मेरा बच्चा तो डफर है, that vocabulary exists. But to describe at length कि उसकी खासियत क्या है, वो unique कैसे है. So we love our children, but I think we don't, really know each child in the way, and for teachers it's even more so. I think it's part of a bigger cultural fabric that we need to talk, and we know how to talk, and the more you talk, the better you get.
Hello, I'm Bandanpreet here. This side, ma'am. Yeah. Thanks for your vivifying words, first of all, and it was really pleasurable listening to you. My question is an extension of what kind of question sir had extended across to you. Your answer to his question was that we need to encourage students to go beyond the ambit of scholastic areas. We need to go into core scholastic areas and kind of not pressurize them to lead themselves to the scholastic areas itself. But in a scenario where we do not have much of vocationalization of education, how do you see this going ahead? I mean, how can we tell our students or tell our children to kind of enhance their skills or hone their skills when there is no vocationalization of education as such taking place?
I wasn't meaning that, vocational versus scholastic. I was just thinking about all the other kinds of things that children can do. And I agree with you, there's not always resources to help them to develop a particular skill and so on. But again, I find looking at some examples quite useful. The gentleman sitting right in front of you used to teach, right? You used to teach in a school in Singh. And I got a letter from him or from his kids, I forget, some time ago, which, last 2 years ago, which said that we have done an asar. Now, we like to think that we are not arrogant, but I thought we were doing asar. So how has the school in Singapore done asar was a big question. And then it turned out, and it's a long story, which, it's a very nice story actually, which he can tell better than I can. But they were 5th standard kids, and in some discussion they had been talking about this kind of a report, and the kids said that Seelampur mein ka report kahan hai? No, Seelampur ka report nahi hai, because it's an. These kids went out and collected information. 5th standard kids, 500 households in their neighborhood, put it together, sent it to us. They had a release, very much like the big release that we do. And then I invited this class and some of the parents and the teachers as well to come and talk to our national ASAR group. And it was amazing what these kids sat on the stage like this and had a panel discussion. I was so impressed that I wrote to NDTV saying, don't call experts, call these guys, because they've done such a wonderful job. So I would say that this is an example of amazing things that kids can do if they are given a little bit of a platform and some facilitation. they will have to study. I mean, there's enough pressures to do that, and I wish we could change that and make it better. But in the meanwhile, how can we create greater spaces for kids to do, many more things? I think that's not being truthful perhaps, but that's what I feel.
Thank you so much.
Shall we take one from that side?
My name is Rahul Singh. I'm a journalist interested in education. I was very interested in what you said about Vietnam. I'm curious to know, do they have government schools and private schools like we do here? And also here, as you know, the government schools are pretty abysmal, and the private schools have been slowly taking that space. And I believe that now 30% of students are being educated in private schools, even though a lot of those people can't afford the private schools. Is it the same situation in Vietnam or not?
I mean, from what I've been able to see, the government sector is the big sector. Private schools, I think, are not very big, but there is, like in many of our states, a big tutoring or a supplementing. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But this is all things I've read. There may be people who've actually been there who can say more. We find in India, again, if I go back to what we are learning from our experiences, also from USR, it almost seems like India has several patterns. If I look at rural India, the northwest, Punjab, Rajasthan, now increasingly UP, more than 50% of kids are now in rural areas are in private schools. And the quality of the private schools is not necessarily that much higher than that of the government schools, especially if you control for the parents' background. So it's really parents, I think, which are driving this. In eastern India, Bihar, Orissa, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Assam, you don't see much private schools. Bihar has still well below 12% private schools. But a massive and I think quite vibrant, may not be the right word because vibrant seems to indicate, but a big, thriving coaching and tuition sector. So in some ways we are, if you just look at private inputs, it looks like everybody tries to maximize what they can have, whether it is through the school or through the school and supplementation. And apparently in much of East Asia also these kind of patterns you see, even if the schools are largely, but my knowledge of Vietnam is only from what I've been able to read.
Okay, we can take another question from there. Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I would like to make 2 points pertaining to the government schools in India. Firstly, you just showed us the figure about the enrollment in the government schools. But what we must realize is that how many students out of those 24 million who have been enrolled in the government school actually attend the school. Because attendance is a big issue in the government schools these days. And secondly, before taking an education model from some other country, I think we should solve some logistical issues which are pertaining in our government schools. Like recently there was a surprise check by the education minister in one of the schools. He discovered that there is a functioning computer lab in the school, but none of the students of the school have ever visited the computer lab. And when he tried to intervene in the matter, he also discovered that the teacher who was supposed to teach them computers didn't know anything about computers. So I think firstly, certain logistical issues in art which are manageable by our own local authorities need to be addressed first, and then we should look at some education model of some other country. This is a point I wanted to make.
Yeah, the attendance part is absolutely true. I think we should stop looking at enrollment numbers. A very good definition. I was in a class in UP. I think it was 4th or 5th. And so I said, because of the black whatever notice board पे था कि नामांकन लिखा था. So I asked the children, नामांकन का मतलब क्या होता है? Got a very good answer. नामांकन का मतलब है कि हमारा नाम यहाँ लिखा हुआ है. हम भी आते हैं कभी-कभी. Now, but the thing is, we use enrollment because enrollment is a static figure. हर साल तो नहीं बदलता है. Attendance is a lot more work. And therefore, you're absolutely right. I think we have large numbers of out-of-school children who are out of school today and yesterday and the day before, whose name may be in school. So I agree. Second is, I'm not suggesting that we pick up anybody's model wholesale. But I think some amount of curiosity is a good idea. The curiosity may lead you to realize that our problem is not, and I have to solve it in my own way. But I think we must have more curiosity than we do right now.
Okay, I think we have time for a last question, so I think we can take that from you.
My name is Manmeet, and I have a question related to ASA because I've done an internship through Ambedkar University, so I have experience of grassroots level. So while doing, you mentioned about the household survey. So we did a household survey in Nandnagari, which is the outskirts of Delhi. So during doing that, it's more of a, not like a ASA that is a purely qualitative, it's more, household survey is more, the ASA is more of a purely quantitative and household is more of a quantitative as well as qualitative. So while doing that, we had various kind of problems because the kind of structure of the question was, especially mother, we tried to ask from the mother about the schools. So she wasn't able to answer. So, I have a bit difficulty with and problem with the with the way you are engaging data that you want to collect from household survey. So how do you look? Even I asked your members who came to Ambedkar University, I didn't get a very satisfactory answer from them because they said that we are mostly on the path of quantitative and we have started to doing qualitative thing from recent years. So I want to know what kind of qualitative work you are doing because just a question, just extending the question that this person has asked, how about the government schools, because you collect this is the achievement levels, but there's a various kind of problems, issues within the society that actually affects the education. So in that qualitative, you don't get to know those kind of things that are affecting the education. And and so my second question is, you mentioned about having a curiosity about various different methods that are used or modeled. So recently, India has used from Italy a very nice model, which is Reggio Emilia model. So what has happened is that they have copied the whole model, and it's not working with the diversity of India. So how do you see? Because do we have that expertise to actually involve and to actually, when we are rather than copying, we are adopting the model, but that is not happening. The whole model is being copied.
Your first question is quite straightforward question. I'm not sure exactly how the tool was used and so on. We don't ask mothers about the school. There is a school observation. The actual way in which ASA is done is there are questions or tasks that the child does in the household, and then in a government school in that sample village, the surveyors go and they make certain observations. So mothers are not asked about the school, they are just asked about whether your child goes to a private school or a government school, which most mothers or even children are able to say. In terms of this importing of models, again, I would like to really stress that I'm not saying that we need to take whole models and try and do them here. I think we need to know more about how other people do things. If you think about how you cook, you cook in a certain way at home, you eat a good dish in someone's house, you usually ask, aapne isko kaise banaya? When you try it at home, you don't necessarily make it their way, but you make it in the way that it makes, tastes right to you. And so all I'm saying is that you may reject, you may eat in someone's house and say, this was terrible, I don't want to eat this, and then don't cook it. But you need to be, I think, a little bit, and I'm just speaking for for me or for my own organization. We need to know a little bit more about how other things are done, whether we take them on or not. I see examples of how different groups have taken ASA into totally different contexts. All we did was to say, this is how we do it, and be very open about here are the mistakes and the failures that we've had, just so that when you make a mistake, make a new one. I think it's a waste when you make the same mistakes over and over again. And in Africa, East Africa, West Africa, in Pakistan, in other places, people have tweaked things that suit their own context. We had a bunch of Indonesians who came, and their view was that there are parts of this that we can use, which we will try, but we will try it in our own way. So really it's not adopting, it's not copying, it's transplanting in a way, in a soil that makes sense to you with as much water that you want to give it. And that's, I think, the approach that I feel works best for us.
Yes, okay. I can hardly deny you the last question.
Question for the chair and a request for the speaker. speaker. The question to the chair is, can we invite the speaker again? And the request to the speaker is, please don't say no. One last one.
मैडम मेरा सिंपल सा क्वेश्चन है, गवर्नमेंट स्कूल के जो टीचर्स हैं उनकी पे प्राइवेट से ज़्यादा है, ये बेसिक मुझे समझ नहीं आई, उसके बावजूद लो लेवल टीचिंग है इनकी। मेरे साथ जितने आए मैं रिटायर्ड पर्सन और मेरे साथ स्कूल के गवर्नमेंट स्कूल के टीचर रिटायर घूमते हैं और मुझे सारे मेंटली रिटार्डेड दिखते हैं तो टीचिंग फैकल्टी। मुझे ये नहीं समझ आ रही कि हमारे ज़माने में पढ़ते थे, अब 95% बच्चे ट्यूशन पढ़ रहे हैं। मान लो अकाउंट्स का सब्जेक्ट है, क्या 10 महीने अकाउंट्स की ट्यूशन पढ़ रहे हैं, टोटल सब्जेक्ट जो अकाउंट्स 10+1 का लेटेस्ट है फॉर एग्जांपल 2 महीने में कोई भी पढ़ा सकता है या पढ़ सकता है। आई फेल टू अंडरस्टैंड कि हमारे टाइम में 5% बच्चे मुश्किल से पढ़ते होंगे ट्यूशन, अब 95% ट्यूशन पढ़ रहे हैं। ये मतलब क्या पैटर्न में, क्या टीचिंग में देयर इज सम ड्रास्टिक डिफेक्ट, समझे नहीं कि जो बच्चों को पेरेंट्स के ऊपर इतना बर्डन आ रहा है, फिजिक्स की भी ट्यूशन, केमिस्ट्री की ट्यूशन, मैथ्स की ट्यूशन और एक आधा एडिशनल बायो भी ले लेते हैं ताकि डॉक्टर का ग्रेड बन जाए जल्दी से। गवर्नमेंट और प्राइवेट वाला ये मुझे क्लियर कीजिए कि उनकी पे ज्यादा है, उसके बाद भी टीचिंग लेवल।
Okay, so these are questions that actually we all have in our heads. Why this, why not that? There are so many things that we want to know, why this, why not that. I have a last observation, it's not really a question, that you are doing work which is obviously going beyond the in-your-face questions. Who is absorbing this? I am hoping that somewhere there is an interface that is actually absorbing all this important experiential data that you're getting, and it is experiential data which is important. And is that being absorbed, and is there any way that we can find a way to make it, apart from having more lectures and more interactions with you, is there some way that you can suggest that we can actually create a space where this can be taken to the next level? Because I don't know about everybody else in this room, but for me, there were lots of such completely amazing, priceless gems that were thrown carelessly by Rukmini, just in jest. But if you really think about it, there were some such brilliant ideas and brilliant thoughts out there, just because they were not being labeled and put across as, listen to me. If you actually reflect, there was a lot of wonderful stuff that came out of this evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Banerji, and we are going to prevail on you to come again. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.